The glass snapped in his hand, and a dark wave of red wine came flying toward me. It hit my chest with a wet, heavy slap. The crowd gasped. The music stopped mid-note. A few people snickered behind their hands as the red stain spread across the pale silk of my dress, Ruth's dress. My heart pounded, but my feet stayed rooted to the stone floor. I felt the air leave my lungs, and still, I didn't move. I'm Ephraim Cole, 68 years old, a widower, a father, and apparently, tonight's entertainment. I'd spent the past month trying to make my daughter's wedding perfect. June had begged me to wear Ruth's old wedding dress, said she wanted her mother to be there with us somehow. "Please, Daddy," she'd said, taking my hands the way she used to when she was little. It would mean the world to me. So I did it. I took that fragile dress out of its box, still smelling faintly of Ruth's perfume, and brought it to a seamstress in Asheville. She worked all night adding a modest jacket and stitching the hem so I wouldn't trip. The dress didn't fit like it had fit Ruth, but it didn't matter. June said it would bring her mother's spirit to her big day. I told myself that a father can take a little embarrassment for his daughter's happiness. The ceremony was beautiful, or it had been before the wine. The garden behind the chapel glowed under strings of tiny white bulbs. Peonies lined the aisle, and cicadas sang from the trees. I had polished my old shoes until they shone. Every detail felt right, like Ruth had whispered instructions from somewhere above. Then there was Beckett Sloan, the groom, the man my daughter loved. I never trusted him, though I tried. He had one of those perfect smiles, the kind that looked rehearsed. Always calling me sir, never Ephraim. The kind of man who thinks respect is something you perform, not something you feel. He was all about appearances, suits, watches, the right wine. He had a startup, or so he said. Some tech company with big investors and bigger promises. June believed in him. She said he was ambitious, driven, visionary. I saw something else, cold eyes that measured people by how much they could be used. When Ruth passed, I raised June on my own. 35 years at the paper mill, double shifts, never missed a rent payment. I packed lunches, fixed broken toys, helped her with algebra I didn't understand. I still remember sitting on the bathroom floor with her after she failed her first driving test, telling her that it didn't matter, that she'd pass next time. She'd hug me, so tight my ribs ached. She was my reason for everything. At the rehearsal dinner, Beckett's friends joked about me wearing a dress. They thought it was some kind of stunt. Someone said, "Man, if this gets online, it'll go viral." I laughed it off, tried not to let it sink its teeth into me. I told myself it was love that mattered, not the laughter. Then, as the ceremony began, Beckett raised a glass of wine and announced he wanted to make a toast. The guests turned toward him. His smile was wide, his voice confident. "To tradition," he said, pausing for effect, "and to knowing when to let go of it." He looked straight at me. Then he flicked his wrist. The wine splashed over my chest in one cruel motion. The dark stain spread fast through the silk, like blood through water. I heard a few people gasp. Others laughed. I could feel every eye on me. Beckett's grin didn't falter. "Let's not make a parody of this special day," he said, pretending it was all in good fun. "A bride doesn't need ghosts at her wedding." June stood frozen, her face pale, her lips parted as if she couldn't find her breath. "Beckett," she whispered, "what did you just do?" He shrugged, the way men do when they think they own the room. "Saved us from embarrassment. Honey, it's what I do." I didn't move. I didn't speak. My fingers trembled as I looked down at the red blotch spreading across Ruth's dress. That dress had carried her down the aisle to me 40 years ago. It had survived decades, mothballs, dust, and time, only to be ruined by a man who couldn't stand the idea of honoring something older than himself. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone muttered. The minister looked down. I stood there, staring at the man my daughter was about to marry, and felt something harden inside me. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. June's bouquet shook in her hands. She started to step toward me, then stopped, afraid to touch the stained fabric. The sight of it seemed to disgust her now, as if the wine had turned me into something she didn't recognize. That was the moment I knew. Something had broken between us. Something that couldn't be repaired with apologies or explanations. I reached into the pocket of the jacket the seamstress had added to the dress. My fingers brushed against the envelope inside. The letter Ruth had written to June before she died. I'd carried it for 20 years, waiting for this day. She'd written it in her careful, looping script, her hand shaking from the medication, her voice still full of love. "Give this to our girl on her wedding day," she'd told me. I took it out slowly. The guests fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. I could feel the weight of every eye on me. I lifted the letter and turned toward June. "I think," I said softly, "before any vows are made, your mother has something to say." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The paper inside was yellowed at the edges. The handwriting, familiar and sacred. My throat tightened as I began to unfold it. And then, from the back of the crowd, a voice called my name. A voice I hadn't heard in years. The sound of it froze me where I stood. And in that instant, I knew this wedding was about to take a turn no one would ever forget. "Ephraim." The voice came again, louder this time, trembling but clear. My heart stumbled in my chest. I turned slowly, my fingers still clutching the letter. Guests shifted in their seats, curious, whispering. Through the blur of faces and sunlight, I saw a figure stepping down the aisle, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a navy blue dress that brushed the grass. It took me a second to believe what I was seeing. "Martha," I breathed. "Ruth's sister. My late wife's only sibling. She had cut all ties with us after Ruth's funeral. Said she couldn't bear the reminders. Said I had buried her sister too quietly. The last time we spoke, she called me a coward. Yet here she was, walking toward me, her hands trembling but her eyes burning with purpose." The crowd parted to let her through. June looked between us, confused, her mouth tightening. Beckett frowned, irritation flickering across his face as if this interruption were some inconvenience in his perfect schedule. When Martha reached me, she didn't speak right away. She looked at the wine stain, at my shaking hands, at the letter. Her face softened. "I'm sorry, Ephraim," she said, just loud enough for those nearest to hear. "I should have been here sooner." Then she turned to June. "You don't know me, sweetheart. I'm your Aunt Martha, your mother's sister." The silence in the garden felt heavy enough to bend the air. June's eyes darted from Martha to me. I know who you are," she said cautiously. "Dad showed me pictures when I was little." Martha nodded. "Then you know I don't show up uninvited. But I had to come today. I had to make sure this letter got read properly." Her words struck me like a wave. She knew about the letter? Martha reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "Ruth gave me this," she said. "Said it was for her daughter on her wedding day. Told me I'd know the right moment to deliver it." June looked uneasy. Beckett shifted, visibly annoyed. "Is this going to take long?" he muttered under his breath. Martha ignored him and turned to me. "She wanted you to have both. The letter and this." She opened the pouch and pulled out a simple gold locket. My breath caught. It was Ruth's. The one she'd worn every day until the end. My hands trembled as she placed it in my palm. The cool metal sent a jolt through me, pulling memories from deep inside. Ruth laughing under the oak tree, Ruth holding June for the first time, Ruth whispering, "Promise me you'll never let her forget who she is." I swallowed hard and looked at June. She seemed small suddenly, her confidence stripped away. The laughter had faded from the crowd. The only sound left was the slow rustle of the trees. I unfolded the letter. The paper crackled. My voice shook as I began to read. "My dearest June, if you're hearing this, I'm no longer by your side, but I hope my words reach you in the space where love never dies. Your father is a man of quiet strength. You might not always understand his ways, but remember this. He has given every breath of his life for you. Do not let the world teach you to be ashamed of love that sacrifices or tradition that honors the past. When you marry, choose someone who sees kindness as courage, not weakness. Choose a man who will never humiliate you, no matter who's watching. And if he does, promise me you'll walk away with your head high, because you are not a reflection of his cruelty." My voice broke. The words clung to my throat. June's eyes shimmered. Beckett's jaw tightened, but his confidence had started to crack. He tried to laugh it off. "That's touching," he said, forcing a smile. "But maybe not the time for a ghost sermon." Martha turned on him, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "You poured wine on a man wearing his late wife's dress during his own daughter's wedding. I think the sermon fits the moment." The crowd murmured. A few people nodded. Someone whispered, "She's right." June stepped toward me, tears starting to form. "Dad?" she whispered. I didn't know he was going to. I raised a hand gently. "I know, sweetheart." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "But your mother did." Beckett scoffed. "This is ridiculous. We're turning a wedding into a therapy session. Let's move on, all right. June looked at him, her face pale. Beckett, why did you do that to my dad? He sighed, his tone dripping with irritation. Because it was weird, June. Look at him. Everyone was laughing. I just saved us from being a viral joke. Martha's eyes darkened. Oh, you'll go viral, son, she said. But not for the reason you think. Someone in the back had started filming. I saw the phone screens rising, the quiet recording of humiliation turning into something else. Truth, maybe. Beckett turned to June, lowering his voice. We can fix this later. Just smile. The guests are watching. June took a step back. No, she said softly. They've already seen enough. I saw the change happen in her eyes, the moment something inside her finally woke up. Beckett reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The crowd had stopped pretending not to watch. June looked at me, then at the stained dress, then back at Beckett. If you think love is about avoiding embarrassment, she said, her voice trembling, then you don't know love at all. The minister tried to say something, but the sound of June's sob cut through everything. She turned and ran down the aisle, past the guests, past the rows of flowers. The wind caught her veil and sent it flying behind her like a white flag. Beckett stood frozen, his smugness evaporating. Cameras caught his blank stare, his clenched fists, his ruin. I looked down at Ruth's letter again. One line near the bottom stood out. If she forgets who she is, remind her, with love, not anger. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into my pocket. Martha placed a hand on my shoulder. You did what she asked, she whispered. Now let her find her way back. I nodded, though my chest ached like something torn open. The guests began to scatter, whispers rising like smoke. Beckett barked orders at his groomsmen, but no one moved. The cameras were still rolling. Somewhere beyond the garden gate, I could hear June crying. And I knew. I couldn't leave it there. The story of this day wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I stood in the silence that followed, my heart heavy and my hands shaking. Guests were already whispering, gathering their belongings, pretending to scroll through their phones as if that might erase what they had just witnessed. The music never resumed. The smell of spilled wine mixed with the peonies, sharp and sweet in the evening air. June was gone. My daughter had run from her own wedding, and all I could do was stare at the empty aisle she'd left behind. Ruth's letter felt like a living thing against my chest, warm through the fabric of the dress. I could almost hear her voice again. Don't chase her in anger, Ephraim. Wait until she's ready to listen. But patience had always been Ruth's gift, not mine. Beckett broke the silence first. She's being dramatic, he said, scoffing. She'll cool off. Someone go find her. His tone carried the confidence of a man who believed everything and everyone belonged to him. No one moved. The groomsmen stood stiff as posts. The bridesmaids exchanged uneasy glances. Martha crossed her arms and stared him down. You think humiliation is something people just walk off? She said quietly. Beckett glared at her. You don't know what you're talking about. This is our day, not yours, not his. He jabbed a finger toward me. And definitely not this old man's circus act. That was when something inside me cracked, not in rage, but in understanding. Beckett wasn't cruel by accident. He was cruel by design. I looked him straight in the eye. Son, I said, my voice low, you've got a lot to learn about what it means to be a man. He laughed. Oh, please, don't start the wise old speech, all right? You're a joke in a dress. Everyone's laughing at you. But I noticed the cameras again. Dozens of guests had their phones out now, recording, whispering. Beckett's laughter grew thinner, less sure. He could feel it too, the tide turning. Martha leaned close to me. Go find her, she whispered. I'll deal with him. I nodded, turning toward the path that led to the parking lot. My shoes were damp from the wine, the silk heavy around my legs. I didn't care. All I could think of was June, how small she had looked when she ran, how lost. The evening light had started to fade when I reached the edge of the property. Down the road, I saw her, sitting on the curb beside her car, still in her gown, head in her hands. Her veil lay on the ground beside her like a fallen bird. I walked slowly toward her, not wanting to startle her. She didn't look up when I sat beside her. I ruined it, she whispered. No, I said softly. He did. Her shoulders shook. I should have seen it. The way he talked to waiters, the way he looked at you when you came to the rehearsal dinner. I thought he was just nervous. You saw what you wanted to see, I said. We all do that when we love someone. She finally looked at me then, eyes red and swollen. Dad, I'm so sorry. You did everything for me, and I let him treat you like some kind of joke. I reached out and took her hand. You don't owe me an apology, June. You owe yourself the truth. That's what your mother wanted you to find today. Her fingers tightened around mine. I don't even know who I am anymore. I smiled faintly. You're your mother's daughter. That's a start. We sat there for a long time. The sounds of the party had died behind us. Only crickets filled the silence now. I told her about the letter, about how Ruth had written it during her last week, hands shaking but mind clear as ever. I told her Ruth had trusted her to grow into a woman who would choose love, not pride. June listened quietly. When I finished, she wiped her face and looked down at the ruined fabric of her dress. You think Mom would be disappointed in me? No, I said. She'd be proud you walked away. A car slowed as it passed us, the driver staring at the sight of a bride and an old man sitting on the curb. June gave a shaky laugh. Guess we're giving them something to talk about. Let them talk, I said. They've been talking my whole life. For the first time since the ceremony began, she smiled. A small, tired smile, but real. Then her phone buzzed. She picked it up, frowned, and showed me the screen. It was a message from Beckett. You better come back before this gets worse. You're making a scene. June's face hardened. She typed something quickly and showed me before she hit send. The scene's over, Beckett. The cameras are still rolling, and you're the only one still acting. She hit send. We sat in silence for another minute before she stood. Dad, can we go home? I nodded. Yeah, let's go home. As we walked toward the car, Martha's voice echoed faintly behind us. She was shouting at Beckett, her tone fierce and unrelenting. I didn't need to hear the words to know she was defending Ruth, defending me, defending what was left of decency in that garden. June and I got into her car. She drove slowly at first, hands trembling on the wheel. The headlights caught the dust rising from the country road. After a few minutes, she said quietly, Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. When Mom got sick, were you ever angry at her for leaving? Her question caught me off guard. I thought about it. No, I said. Never angry. Just scared. Scared I wouldn't be enough for you. She glanced at me, her eyes soft. You were more than enough. The road wound through the trees, and the town lights began to appear ahead. I felt a strange calm wash over me. Maybe this was how healing started. Not with speeches, not with revenge, but with a drive home after the world had fallen apart. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered on automatically. The old swing Ruth loved creaked in the breeze. June got out, her gown brushing against the gravel. Before she went inside, she turned to me. Dad, she said, her voice low but steady. I'm not going back there. I'm done with him. I nodded. I know. She smiled faintly, then looked at the house. Can we read the rest of Mom's letter together? Tomorrow? Tomorrow, I said. I'll make pancakes. Just like the mornings when you were little. June disappeared into the house. I stood outside for a moment, looking up at the night sky. The stars blinked faintly above the roof, like Ruth winking at me from somewhere far, but near enough to feel. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It read, You think this is over, old man? It's just getting started. The number was Beckett's. And I knew then, the storm hadn't passed. It was only beginning. The message on my phone glowed against the darkness like a blade. You think this is over, old man? It's just getting started. For a moment, I stared at it, unsure whether to laugh or to worry. The night air was cool, and the cicadas had gone quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, then nothing. The silence that followed felt too deliberate, as though the world itself were waiting for my next move. I walked up the porch steps and paused before going inside. The smell of old wood and rain met me as I opened the door. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. June was in the living room, curled up on the couch in her ruined gown, still clutching the letter. Her makeup had streaked, but her expression was calm, almost empty. I slipped the phone into my pocket and said nothing. She didn't need more to carry tonight. I just covered her with a blanket and turned off the lamp. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water. My hand still shook. I'd seen men break in factories and hospitals, in battlefields of the ordinary sort, divorces, funerals, deaths, but I had never seen cruelty so deliberate, so measured. Beckett hadn't just humiliated me. He'd tested her loyalty, as if to prove to himself that love could be controlled through shame. I took a deep breath and looked at my reflection in the dark window. The wine stain still clung to the fabric of the dress. I couldn't bring myself to take it off yet. It felt like armor now. The phone buzzed again. Another message. You embarrassed her. Everyone's talking about it. You think you can just ruin a man's life and walk away? You'll regret this. My first instinct was to ignore him. But a second later, I realized this wasn't just about ego anymore. Beckett had power, money, friends who thought like him, men who saw compassion as weakness. If he couldn't control June through love, he might try through fear. I scrolled up the screen, searching for some clue in his tone, something to measure the danger. Each message was shorter, meaner. He wanted to provoke me. Then another text appeared, this one different. A man like you doesn't belong in her world. You'll see soon enough. That was enough. I locked the phone and exhaled slowly. I'd worked in a paper mill long enough to know when pressure built too fast, it always ended in an explosion if not relieved. I had to protect her, quietly, carefully. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, landing on the old table Ruth had sanded herself years ago. I was making pancakes when June came in wearing one of my old flannel shirts. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was strength in her face I hadn't seen in years. Morning, I said softly. Morning, she murmured. She sat down, running her fingers over the edge of the table. I've been reading Mom's letter again. There's a line I missed last night. She opened the folded paper and read aloud. When the world tries to make you feel small, remember that dignity isn't loud. It's quiet and steady, and it always outlasts cruelty. She looked up at me. I think she knew I'd need to hear that today. She always did have a way of writing what mattered most, I said. We ate in silence for a while. The world outside seemed almost normal, the sound of a distant lawn mower, a mail truck passing by, sunlight glinting on the fence. But the peace was thin, fragile. I could feel the tension sitting between us, the unspoken question of what came next. June broke the quiet first. He called me 10 times last night. I didn't answer. Then he sent an email. What did it say? She hesitated. That I embarrassed him. That I made him look weak in front of everyone. He said he could ruin me if I tried to go public. My stomach tightened. Go public. She nodded. The videos, Dad. The ones people took at the wedding. They're all over the internet. The clips everywhere. People are calling it the red wine wedding. It's viral. I sat back, stunned. Viral. She pulled out her phone and showed me. There it was, my humiliation replayed again and again. The moment the wine hit. The gasps. Beckett's smug face. And me, standing still, the stain spreading across Ruth's dress. The caption read, Father of the bride steals the show in his wife's old wedding dress. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. Some mocked me. Some praised me. Some didn't know what they were seeing and turned it into a joke. I should delete it, she whispered. I can't stand it. I placed a hand over hers. No, leave it. Let them see what happened. Let them see who he really is. Her eyes searched mine. You don't want revenge? I shook my head. Revenge is loud. Dignity's quiet. We'll do this the right way. She nodded slowly. Then what's the right way? Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door. It was Martha. She stood there with a determined expression and a cup of coffee in each hand. You two better sit down, she said, stepping inside. That boy's not just texting threats. He's panicking. The company he works for? They're trying to scrub every trace of that video from the internet. June frowned. Why? Because the investors saw it, Martha said. They don't want their golden boy tied to a viral humiliation. One of my friends at the newspaper told me. He's been calling everyone, trying to spin the story. Claims you, Ephraim, staged the whole thing for sympathy. June's mouth fell open. He what? I leaned forward. Let him lie. Truth has a way of finding daylight. Martha nodded. Good. Because daylight's coming. The paper's running the story tomorrow. Everything that happened. They've got witness statements from guests who saw him pour that wine on you. June looked terrified. This could get messy. Martha smirked. Messy's what justice looks like before it's clean. For the first time since the wedding, I laughed, a low, tired laugh that felt like air after drowning. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a voicemail. The display read, Beckett Sloan. I pressed play. His voice was low, controlled, almost cold. You think this is about a video? No, this is about control. You took mine away, old man. So now I'm going to take yours. The message ended. June's face drained of color. Dad, what does that mean? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out the window toward the street, where a black car sat idling at the corner. The same car that had followed us from the wedding. The storm that had begun with a splash of red wine was about to reveal just how deep its roots went. The black car had been there since sunrise, motionless at the end of the street. Its tinted windows caught the light without revealing what sat behind them. At first, I told myself it was nothing, a neighbor's visitor, a parked delivery car. But as the hours passed, I knew better. Whoever was inside wasn't waiting for anyone else. They were waiting for me. I stepped back from the window, keeping my voice calm. June, go upstairs and pack a small bag. Just the essentials. Her brow furrowed. Why? What's going on? Just trust me. Martha looked from me to the window and went pale. Ephraim, that car. I know. June hesitated, but the tone of my voice must have reached her. She ran upstairs without another word. Martha set her coffee down on the counter. You think Beckett's behind this? I don't think. I know. I rubbed a hand over my face. He's not the kind of man who lets go. Humiliation's poison to people like him. He'll spend every ounce of energy trying to get the last word. Martha folded her arms, her eyes hard. Then we don't give him that word. A knock at the door made us both jump. 3 sharp raps. I stepped quietly to the window and peeked through the blinds. A man in a black suit stood on the porch, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy morning. His hands were clasped in front of him, polite but rehearsed. I opened the door halfway. Can I help you? Mr. Cole, he said smoothly. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Beckett Sloan. Martha moved behind me. Then you can turn around and tell him to crawl back to whatever rock he came from. The man smiled faintly, ignoring her. Mr. Sloan wishes to extend an offer. He's willing to settle this matter privately. No press, no lawsuits, no further embarrassment to your family. He only asks that you both stop spreading the video and issue a short apology clarifying that the incident was misunderstood. I stared at him. Misunderstood? He threw wine on me at my daughter's wedding. The man's expression didn't change. He feels remorseful. Deeply so. Remorseful people don't send threats in the middle of the night, I said, my tone flat. His jaw twitched. Mr. Cole, this is a generous offer. It won't stay on the table long. Then take it off. I started to close the door, but his foot moved just in time to block it. You should reconsider, he said softly. Mr. Sloan is a man with resources. You don't want this to get ugly. Martha's voice rose from behind me. He just made it ugly. I pushed the door closed harder, forcing his foot back, and locked it. Through the window, I watched him walk down the steps, calm and unhurried. He climbed into the waiting car. It sat there for a few more seconds, then rolled slowly down the street until it disappeared around the corner. Martha exhaled. What now? We document everything, I said. Every message, every visit, every threat. If he wants to play dirty, we'll give the truth a stage. June came down the stairs holding her bag. Dad, what's happening? I explained what had just occurred. She sank onto the couch, clutching the locket around her neck. He's not going to stop, is he? I shook my head. Not until he realizes fear doesn't work on us. Martha leaned forward. I know a reporter at the Asheville Herald. She's good. Honest. Let's tell her everything. On record. June looked uncertain. You think the paper will care? They'll care, I said. They already ran the story once. This will give them the ending they need. That evening, the reporter, a young woman named Lydia Price, came to the house with a notepad and a small camera. She sat at our kitchen table and listened as I told her everything, from the night Ruth died to the moment Beckett's man showed up on my porch. Lydia asked careful questions, never interrupting. When we finished, she looked at me with quiet admiration. You've handled this with more grace than most people would, she said. But you should know, once this story runs, it won't just be Beckett's world that shifts. It'll be yours too. I've lived through worse storms, I said. She nodded, switched off her recorder, and promised the article would be live by morning. After she left, the house felt too still. June retreated to her room. Martha stayed in the guest room, talking softly on the phone to someone from church. I sat on the porch, watching the fireflies rise from the grass. Ruth's voice echoed faintly in my memory. Dignity isn't loud. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message. No name, just a number. You made your choice. Now watch what happens next. Before I could reply, headlights flared at the end of the driveway. A car door slammed. Then another. I stood, my pulse quickening. June appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. Dad, what's that noise? Two silhouettes emerged from the dark, walking up the gravel path. Martha came running from the hallway, phone in hand. Police are on their way, she said. Don't open that door. I didn't move. The figures stopped halfway up the drive. One of them raised his hand, holding something that glinted in the porch light. It wasn't a weapon. It was a phone. The voice that came next was all too familiar. Smooth, confident, cruel. Evening, Mr. Cole, Beckett called out. Thought I'd stop by. You and I need to have a little chat. The light caught his grin. Behind him, a second man leaned against the car, watching. June gasped, and I stepped forward. You've got a lot of nerve showing up here. He spread his arms. Just tying up loose ends. I didn't answer. My eyes flicked to the street. No police yet. Just the low hum of the engine and the faint smell of exhaust. Don't worry, Beckett said, smirking. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to offer a deal. I crossed my arms. The answer's still no. His smile widened. You haven't even heard it yet. The porch light flickered as thunder rolled in the distance. Behind him, lightning split the sky in two. And I knew, right then, that whatever Beckett had come for, he wasn't leaving until he got it, or until I stopped him myself. Rain began to patter softly against the porch roof as Beckett took another step forward. The air smelled of wet earth and tension. He wore the same smug expression he had at the wedding, but the confidence was thinner now, cracked around the edges. Behind him, the tall man by the car kept a steady gaze, arms crossed. Stop right there, I said. You're trespassing. Beckett raised his hand slightly, as though mocking surrender. Relax, old man. I told you, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just came to fix things before they spiral out of control. Martha moved beside me, her phone still in her hand. The police are on their way, she said flatly. You've got 2 minutes to leave. He smiled. Ah, Martha. Still dramatic, I see. Don't worry, this'll only take one. I could hear June behind me. Her breathing was quick, uneven. I wanted to keep her out of this, but Beckett's voice carried into every corner of the house. What do you want? I asked. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper sealed in a plastic envelope. A statement, he said, signed by you and your daughter. It says the incident at the wedding was a misunderstanding, that we were all emotional, and that you forgive me. In return, I'll make sure the video disappears from every platform by morning. I let out a quiet laugh. You really think forgiveness can be bought? He shrugged. Forgiveness? No, but silence can. The thunder outside grew louder. I could see the rain running down his face now, dripping from his chin. Still, he stood there, unmoving, confident that his money could bend the weather itself. You're wasting your time, I said. Beckett's tone hardened. You've got no idea what you're doing. You think people online are your friends? They'll turn on you. They'll twist the story until you're the villain. The bitter old man who tried to ruin his daughter's wedding because he couldn't let go of the past. I'm offering you a way out. You're offering me a lie. He smirked. Same thing these days. I took a step forward. The porch light flickered again, throwing his shadow across the wet ground. You came all the way here for a signature? Not just a signature, he said. A guarantee that you'll stay quiet. No interviews, no pity pieces, no more headlines. The world forgets this ever happened, and we all move on. Before I could answer, June pushed past me and stepped out onto the porch. Her hair was damp, her voice shaking but firm. Move on? You humiliated my father in front of everyone. You poured wine on the last piece of my mother he had left. You don't get to say move on. Beckett's eyes flickered with something darker. June, you're upset. Don't, she cut in. Don't talk to me like I'm some intern you can smooth talk into silence. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Do you have any idea what this is costing me? My investors are threatening to pull out. My board wants me gone. All because of a stupid video that makes you two look like saints and me like a monster. You think I'll just let that stand? You made yourself the monster, I said quietly. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. You could have stopped it. You could have played along, laughed it off, helped me save face. But no, you stood there like a martyr, soaking it in, making me look like the villain. That's because you were, Martha said from the doorway. He ignored her. You think the internet cares about your truth, old man? It only cares about the version I pay for. Something in his voice shifted then. It wasn't arrogance anymore. It was desperation, the kind of fear that hides behind anger. You've lost everything. I said. That's why you're here. Not for us, for yourself. Rain poured harder now, soaking him completely. He didn't move. His polished shoes sank into the mud. You've got no idea who you're dealing with. I stepped closer. Neither do you. Behind him, the tall man by the car moved suddenly, opening the trunk. My gut tightened. I didn't see what he reached for, but I knew enough from a lifetime of near misses in factory yards. Men who snapped under pressure. Men who thought threats were power. June, inside, I said sharply. She hesitated, then backed toward the door. Beckett raised his voice over the rain. You walk away from this, Ephraim. All of you. You stop talking to reporters, you take down the posts, and I'll make sure you live out your little retirement in peace. But if you keep pushing, then what? I asked. He paused. The thunder rolled again, echoing through the trees. Then I'll make sure you regret it. That was when the flashing lights appeared, blue and red, cutting through the rain. 2 police cruisers pulled up behind his car. Officers stepped out, raincoats glistening, hands resting on their belts. Beckett froze. Martha raised her phone triumphantly. Told you they were coming. One of the officers called out, Sir, step away from the property. Beckett turned toward me, eyes burning. You think this ends with tonight? You're wrong. You've just made an enemy who doesn't forget. He started walking backward toward his car, still glaring at me. The officer stopped him halfway, asking questions he ignored. The tall man closed the trunk quickly, pretending nothing had happened. Minutes later, they were gone, swallowed by the storm. I stood on the porch for a long time, watching the rain wash across the driveway, leaving no trace of footprints or tire marks. June came beside me, shivering slightly. Is it over? She whispered. I looked out into the darkness. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew men like Beckett didn't quit when they lost. They regrouped. They planned. And somewhere in that black car, a wounded ego was already plotting its next move. Inside, the house was warm again, but the quiet felt heavy. I looked at Ruth's picture on the mantel, the one from our wedding day, both of us laughing under the sunlight, and I made a silent promise. Whatever Beckett tried next, he wouldn't win. Not this time. And as the rain drummed against the roof, a new thought took root, steady, cold, and certain. If he wanted a war built on pride, I'd answer it with patience. If he came for noise, I'd fight with truth. And the truth, when spoken calmly enough, could burn louder than any fire. The rain had stopped by dawn. Mist clung to the yard, softening the edges of the fence and turning the old oak tree into a ghostly outline against the pale sky. Inside the house, the air carried the faint smell of coffee and damp wood. I hadn't slept much. Neither had June. I sat at the kitchen table, Ruth's letter open in front of me. The paper had grown fragile, the creases thin as veins. I read the same lines again and again until they felt carved into me. If life ever tests you with cruelty, remember that grace is a weapon too. It disarms without blood. I traced the words with my finger, hearing her voice in the quiet. Grace was never my first instinct. Hard work, yes. Endurance, always. But grace? That was Ruth's domain. She believed in the slow strength of kindness, even when the world mocked it. June came down the stairs wrapped in a blanket. Her face looked drawn but calmer than the night before. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. You didn't sleep either, she said. I smiled faintly. Seems I forgot how. We sat there in silence, 2 people learning to breathe after the storm. Then Martha entered, still in her housecoat, holding the morning paper. It's out, she said. Front page. The headline stretched across the top. Father of the bride speaks out. Viral wedding sparks debate on dignity and cruelty. She laid it on the table. There was my picture. Me standing in the garden, wine dripping from the dress, eyes fixed somewhere past the camera. Underneath, Lydia Price's article told the story straight. No exaggeration, no pity, just truth. June read quietly, her lips parting as she went on. Dad, she really got it right. She listened, I said. That's rare these days. Martha grinned. It's already spreading. People are sharing it everywhere. She wrote about Beckett's attempt to silence you, about the threats, the visit last night. She even quoted Ruth's letter. Folks are calling you the gentle father. June raised her eyes. The what? The gentle father, Martha repeated. It's trending on social media. There's a clip of you standing there with the wine all over your chest. People are calling it the most powerful thing they've ever seen. A man refusing to strike back. I leaned back, stunned. I didn't plan any of this. Of course not, she said. That's why it matters. June smiled for the first time in days. Mom would have loved that title. I chuckled softly. She would have said it made me sound like a preacher. Martha folded her arms. Beckett won't be pleased. His investors are already pulling out. Lydia's article named the company's connections and public pressures building. June frowned. What'll he do now? I took a sip of my coffee. Probably what men like him always do when the mirror stops flattering them. Look for someone to blame. Martha nodded slowly. You need to be careful, Ephraim. The police said they'll patrol the area for a few nights, but once the noise dies down, he might try again. I'm not afraid of him, I said simply, but I'll be careful. The day passed quietly. Messages poured in, old colleagues from the mill, neighbors, even strangers who'd lost faith in kindness until they'd seen that video. Some said they cried. Some said it gave them courage to stand up for themselves. Each message felt like a thread pulling us toward something bigger than shame. By evening, June seemed lighter. She made dinner. Real food this time, not the instant meals she'd lived on in the city. We ate together, laughing softly over old stories. I told her how Ruth used to hum while washing dishes, and she tried to mimic the tune. For a few precious hours, the house felt like it used to. Then, just as the sun dipped behind the hills, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a video link. The sender's name read private account. I hesitated before opening it. June noticed and leaned over. What is it? The video began with shaky footage, clearly recorded from a phone. It showed the parking lot behind the chapel after the ceremony. Guests were leaving, chatting quietly. Then, the camera turned and caught Beckett by his car, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, but the words were clear. Delete it. I don't care what it costs. Find the girl who filmed it and shut her up. No, I don't want excuses, just handle it. Then the video ended. June's mouth fell open. Someone recorded him. Looks that way, I said. Martha leaned over, grinning. That's our proof. That's everything the paper needs to end this once and for all. I nodded slowly, but a strange unease lingered. Someone sent this for a reason, I said. But who? Before anyone could answer, another message came through, from the same account. He's planning something bigger. Be ready. I stared at the screen. No name. No context. Just that. June looked at me, fear returning to her eyes. Dad, what does that mean? I didn't know, but I felt it then. The air changing again, the quiet before another wave. Outside, the sky had cleared, yet the wind had begun to stir, carrying the faint scent of smoke from somewhere far off. The story wasn't over. Beckett might have lost his company, his reputation, his control, but men like him didn't vanish quietly. They came back with something worse than anger. They came back with purpose. And as night settled in, I could feel that purpose moving closer. The smell of smoke grew thicker as the night deepened. It wasn't the faint, familiar scent of someone's fireplace. This was sharp, bitter, heavy, industrial. I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool, but the horizon flickered orange, like the edge of a storm. Martha came out behind me, wrapping her shawl tighter. That isn't from here, is it? No, I said, squinting toward the east. Looks closer to the old mill road. June joined us a moment later, phone in hand. Social media says there's a fire near downtown, she said, scrolling quickly. Something about an office building. A knot formed in my chest. What building? She read the post again. A tech startup headquarters. They're saying it's Sloan Digital Solutions. The name hit like a hammer. Beckett's company. Martha let out a low whistle. Well, poetic justice doesn't waste time. But I didn't smile. It's too convenient, I said quietly. Too clean. He's a man who plans. If his company's burning, it's not an accident. June looked at me, confused. You think he did it? I didn't answer right away. A man losing everything sometimes tries to destroy the evidence before the world sees what he's done. Maybe this was his escape. We stood there for a while, watching the faint glow. Sirens wailed in the distance, carried on the wind. Then my phone buzzed again. A message, from the same private account as before. He's erasing himself. But he's not finished with you. I read it twice, then showed it to Martha and June. Martha frowned. Whoever's sending these knows too much. June shivered. Dad, this is scaring me. I put an arm around her shoulders. We'll figure it out. Inside, the house felt smaller now. Every creak of the floorboards amplified. I checked the locks twice, then turned off the lights. The three of us sat in the living room, the faint sound of the television playing a live report from the city. The fire had engulfed 2 floors. Beckett Sloan was listed as missing. June leaned forward. Missing? As in, they don't know? The reporter said through the screen. Authorities suspect foul play or possible arson. Witnesses claim a black sedan was seen leaving the scene minutes before the blaze. I turned off the television. The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. Martha was the first to speak. If he's really gone, then maybe this ends here. But even as she said it, I knew she didn't believe it. Neither did I. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the moonlight pooling on the floor, thinking about Ruth, about her letter, about the quiet strength she always carried. She would have told me to be cautious, to protect June, to hold steady until truth revealed itself. Around midnight, headlights flashed through the curtains. My pulse spiked. I moved closer to the window and saw a car slowing near our mailbox. It wasn't the black sedan. This one was smaller, silver, dented along the side. The driver didn't get out. They just rolled down the window and placed something on the ground beside the post. Then they drove away. I waited until the sound of the engine faded before stepping outside. The air was still thick with smoke from miles away. Crickets had gone quiet. Near the mailbox lay a small brown envelope sealed with tape. My name was written on it in thick black marker. I looked around once, then picked it up and went back inside. Martha met me at the door, whispering, "What's that?" I opened it slowly. Inside was a flash drive and a single sheet of paper. The paper had only one sentence typed across it. "He's not missing. He's watching." June gasped. "Dad, what does that mean?" I turned the flash drive over in my hand. "We'll find out soon." Martha fetched her laptop from the dining room. "Careful," she said as she plugged it in. It could be anything. The screen flickered, then loaded a single video file titled Redemption. I clicked it. The image that appeared made my stomach tighten. Beckett sat in a dark room, his face lit only by the faint glow of a single lamp. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. Smoke curled in the background, like the remnants of a fire. He leaned toward the camera, his voice slow and deliberate. "You think you beat me, Ephraim? You think the world loves you because you stood still and played the saint? The world loves martyrs until it's time to move on. And when they do, I'll still be here. Watching. Waiting. You can't erase what you made me lose." He smirked faintly. "You wanted grace. I'll give you grace. Just not the kind your wife would have preached." The video ended abruptly. June's hand flew to her mouth. "He's alive." Martha shook her head. "Or someone wants us to think he is." I sat back slowly, staring at the black screen. "No," I said quietly. "That's him. He's not done. Not yet." The next morning, police tape covered what was left of Sloan Digital Solutions. News channels called it a tragedy. Commentators called it suspicious. And as I watched the footage, one detail froze my blood. Behind the caution tape, in the crowd of onlookers, a figure stood, just far enough to blur, just long enough to be uncertain. But I knew that stance, that tilt of the head, that quiet, confident smirk. Beckett Sloan was alive, and he was coming back. By the time the morning news confirmed what I already knew, the entire town had started whispering about it. Some said Beckett had faked his death to dodge insurance fraud. Others thought he was on the run. But deep down, I knew better. Beckett Sloan wasn't hiding. He was hunting. The footage looped on every channel. The smoldering wreck of his office, the police tape flapping in the wind, and that brief, almost spectral glimpse of him in the background. Just out of reach, but unmistakable. June paced the kitchen floor, still in her pajamas. "They said he's wanted for questioning," she murmured. "Dad, what if he comes here again?" "He won't make that mistake twice," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "He'll come differently this time." Martha stood by the window, arms folded tight. "The man's unraveled. He's lost his money, his reputation, and now his mind. That makes him dangerous." I nodded. "That's why we stay ahead." The police came later that afternoon. Officer Dillard, the same one who'd responded the night Beckett came to the house, took notes while scanning the perimeter. "If he contacts you again, you call us right away," he said. "We've got patrols running through the area every few hours." June gave a small, grateful nod, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. She was strong, like Ruth, but the kind of strong that trembles in private. When the officer left, Martha tried to lighten the air. "Well, at least he's running out of friends. Once the truth hits investors' ears, he'll have nowhere to hide. I wasn't so sure. Men like Beckett always found shadows deep enough to crawl into. That night, the quiet returned, but it wasn't the good kind. The house felt too still, the silence too rehearsed. I checked the locks again, then sat by the window, the same place Ruth used to sit when she waited for me to come home from late shifts. Sometime after midnight, a faint tapping came from outside. 3 quick knocks, then nothing. I froze. Martha stirred in the guest room. June's door creaked upstairs. Another knock, softer this time, deliberate. I walked to the front door, my heartbeat slow but heavy. Through the peephole, I saw only darkness. I was about to turn away when I caught it. A small white envelope, taped neatly to the glass. I waited a moment, then pulled it free. My name again, written in the same sharp, black ink as before. Inside was a single note. You took everything from me. Let's see how it feels when I take it back. And beneath the words, something worse. A photograph. It was June, sitting in her car that morning, the timestamp printed in the corner. She was smiling faintly, unaware of the camera watching her from somewhere nearby. I gripped the photo until the edges bent. Martha appeared behind me, her voice low. What is it? I showed her the picture. She swore under her breath. We're going to the police right now. We will, I said, but not before I find out how close he's really been. I stepped out into the cold, flashlight in hand. The air was damp, the smell of ash still faint on the breeze. I moved along the edge of the yard, scanning the bushes near the road. The soil was soft from last night's rain. Near the mailbox, I saw them, footprints. Fresh, too large to be mine. They led toward the trees that bordered the property, then vanished into the undergrowth. Martha called after me, but I didn't answer. Something in me had shifted. Fear had given way to focus. Beckett had drawn his line. Now I would draw mine. By morning, I had made my decision. We're not waiting anymore. I told them over breakfast. If he's close enough to take pictures, then he's close enough to make a mistake. And when he does, we'll be ready. June shook her head. Dad, you can't confront him. He's dangerous. I'm not confronting him, I said. I'm exposing him. I spent the rest of the day gathering what I had. Every message, every threat, every video. Lydia from the Herald called again, saying the story had gone national. People want to hear from you, she said. They're calling it the viral wedding reckoning. Tell them the truth's not done yet, I replied. That evening, I drove into town alone. The burnt remains of Beckett's office still smoked faintly under the caution tape. The windows were blackened, the walls half collapsed. I parked a short distance away and sat there for a while, watching the scene. Then I saw movement. A man, wearing a hooded jacket, walking along the side alley that led behind the building. He moved with the same confident stride I remembered. I stepped out of the car quietly. The gravel crunched under my shoes. Beckett, I called. He stopped but didn't turn. You don't have to run anymore, I said. Whatever you're planning, it ends tonight. Slowly, he faced me. His face was gaunt, soot-streaked, eyes sunken but alive. There was no laughter now, only fury. You ruined me, he said. His voice was lower, rasped raw by smoke and hatred. Everything I built, gone. You stood there pretending to be righteous while I burned. You did that yourself, I said. He shook his head. No. You lit the match when you refused to play along. When you let them see me as the villain. You poured wine on an old man in his dead wife's dress, I said quietly. You didn't need my help to be the villain. His hands clenched. You think that video makes you a hero? It makes you a target. Heroes always fall. He took a step closer. I didn't move. Turn yourself in, I said. You're already finished. He laughed bitterly. No, not yet. You haven't lost anything that matters to you. When you do, you'll understand. Before I could respond, he dropped something at his feet, a phone, still recording. Then he turned and ran into the dark alley. I started after him, but by the time I reached the corner, he was gone. The only sound left was the faint hum of the streetlights and the distant hiss of cooling ash. I picked up the phone. The recording was still running. When I played it back, my blood turned cold. The last thing it captured was Beckett's voice, muttering under his breath as he ran. She'll pay first. Then he'll know what loss feels like. He was talking about June, and that was the moment I realized. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. Chapter 10, The Quiet Victory. The night I decided to end this, I slept less and planned more. I sat at the kitchen table with Ruth's letter beside me and a stack of printed messages, videos, and witness statements in front of me. June slept in the room where she had drawn her curtains the way she used to as a child, the soft glow of her bedside lamp, like the small lighthouse she once needed. Martha brewed coffee and muttered over phone calls. Lydia from the paper had agreed to run the full account the next morning and had promised to sit in on a meeting I had arranged at the community center. I felt steadier than I had in weeks. I wanted Beckett caught clean, not trapped in gossip or chance. I wanted him to answer for what he had done, and I wanted June to stand without fear when the storm finally passed. That meant arranging the right people in the right place and letting truth perform its own work. I plotted nothing that would pit me beneath his level. I had watched too many men lose themselves in revenge to believe I should become one. The plan was simple and careful. Lydia would publish a piece that laid out the timeline and the evidence. Officer Dillard agreed to bring a detective to the community meeting where Lydia, June, and I would speak. My neighbor Mrs. Hargrove volunteered to make sandwiches and to bring the folding chairs she kept for church bazaars. A dozen of the people who had been at the wedding, people who had filmed on their phones and who had watched in shock, agreed to sit quietly in the front row and to answer questions if the police needed them. The town wanted an end as much as we did. That was the truth I would harness. I opened the meeting with Ruth's letter. The room smelled of coffee and new paper. Voices faded when I began to read. My voice did not tremble in the way the cameras might have wanted it to. It was steady and honest. I read lines she had written 20 years ago, words that carried a truth so ordinary it shone. Kindness was courage. Dignity outlasted cruelty. Love meant standing up for one another. June sat beside me and held my hand. The old necklace Ruth had worn rested against my palm and warmed with every squeeze. Lydia followed with the article she had written. She did not dramatize. She described dates, statements, the man who had arrived at our porch and the messages that had followed. She described Beckett's attempt to silence witnesses and his visit to the mill where a former contractor had stated that the fire had been no accident. She played, without flourish, the clip someone had taken the day he asked his associate to find the girl who filmed the wedding. The room hummed like a hive. I knew then that the thread leading from humiliation to arson had been pulled taut. Detective Mercer spoke next. He unfolded a series of documents that left no room for doubt. There was the footage of Beckett at his company the night the fire began, the GPS check-ins, bank transfers that suggested panic, and a burn plan. He did not shout. He did not grandstand. He read facts and let them stand like stones built into a wall. The police had enough to arrest on suspicion and more than enough to question him about the threats he had made. The community sighed a collective breath. We had expected him to run. Instead, he arrived an hour late, eyes hollow and face pale, as if the smoke had hollowed him out. He stood in the doorway like a man who had been reduced to a single sentence. A murmur moved through the crowd, but it was not the cruel whisper he had once enjoyed. It sounded like pity and disappointment blended into one. Detective Mercer stepped toward him and said his name. Beckett's mouth opened and closed with something like surprise. He tried, at first, to speak the language he had used before, smooth excuses and rehearsed charm. That did not work. The evidence was a net now. He found himself looking at families he had frightened, at colleagues whose savings had vanished, at the girl whose phone had been the match and not the fire. I had imagined many endings. I had pictured him broken and bitter. I had pictured him crying. The actual moment was quieter than my worst imaginings and sharper than my gentlest wishes. He did not admit guilt at first. He did not bow. He simply stopped. The mask of his certainty slipped and revealed a man who had been using other people as props for his life. The detective handcuffed him gently, but with an attention that spoke of official finality. When the last officer let him out, a few people clapped. I did not. Applause is a small currency in moments like that, and I thought of Ruth and of the dignity she carried like a slow flame. I wanted something that lasted longer than applause. I wanted change. The legal process followed the expected pattern. There were statements gathered, depositions, a hearing. The papers named fraud, arson, and threats. Investors testified. A contractor described orders given to obscure his tracks. Beckett had tried to build himself up by destroying others, and the law unfolded those lies with patient insistence. I chose the path that made my heart quiet rather than loud. In court, I read Ruth's letter aloud again. June read a portion too. We did not demand vengeance. We asked for justice and for measures that would prevent other families from being terrorized. I asked the judge that the sentence include more than bars, rehabilitation, and public restitution. I wanted Beckett to be held accountable and taught, not merely hidden. The judge listened, and people who had watched my years of ordinary endurance understood the gravity of what was asked. The sentence included restitution to the victims and a required period of community service that involved supporting programs for small business owners who had lost everything in a fire and for young people learning ethics and entrepreneurship. The final twist surprised everyone, though not the people who had watched. In court, a man who had been an investor stood up to testify. He had built his fortune on the idea of tidy exits and moral opacity. When the videos and the articles made his phone ring with outraged calls, he finally turned and saw that profit without honesty was an empty room. He had offered back a portion of the money he had gained and had supported a fund in Ruth's name to help families who had suffered from similar acts. That fund would pay for small repairs, legal aid, and a class at the community center called Honest Business. He did this not because of fear, but because someone had shown him that the town was watching and that the town kept its own. Beckett saw consequence, and he felt it in a way that made him shrink. It was not a spectacle. It was a real and steady unmaking of the life he had spent building on thin promises. He would spend time in jail and then in programs where he would have to confront the damage he caused. The law does not mend hearts, but it can close a door on the worst of a man's options. I did not relish his ruin. I had never wanted to trample a man who had been beaten by his own choices into dust. I wanted the wound to be salted with truth. That is what happened. The town rebuilt. People who had recorded on their phones came forward to give statements. A woman who had filmed the wedding sat in the front row at the community center and wept quietly as she met June's eyes. June hugged her and said thank you. The hug was simple and clean. That is what victory looks like in a small town that still remembers how to be human. After the court case ended, I found myself standing in the community center with a cup of tea, chair warmed by the body that had previously sat in it. June had planned an event there called Ruth's Table. It was modest. It was not a monument. It was a shared meal where people who had been affected by loss could come and talk and receive help. The first fund recipients included a bakery owner whose roof had caved and a teacher who had found herself fighting a company that had wronged her. There were tears and laughter and plans. Ruth's letter hung on the wall in a simple frame, next to a photo of her where she smiled with dirt on her hands after planting trees behind our house. I stood at the doorway and watched people lean toward one another. Martha handed out plates, more forceful than ever. Lydia took photographs that were not meant to scandalize. I felt June come up behind me and rest her head on my shoulder. Her breath smelled like coffee and the lemon cake she had brought. I did not own any grand speech then. I did not need to. The ache in my chest softened into an ache that honored what had been lost and what had been built. In the quiet that followed, I walked out to the small garden Ruth had loved. The peonies were pruned, the soil fresh. I sat on the old bench and pulled Ruth's letter from my coat. I read the last line again. Dignity is quiet and steady and always outlasts cruelty. The words felt truer than they ever had. Someone leaned against the fence then. It was Beckett, released on bail after cooperating with investigators who needed to close the case against others who had helped him. He approached with the slow gait of a man who had learned through pain. He did not raise his eyes to me. He stood a respectful distance away and spoke in a voice that had lost its earlier sharpness. I am sorry, he said simply. I wanted to tell you that before anything else. I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted to say it. I had rehearsed many responses in the dark nights that came before this moment. I could have scolded him. I could have asked him to explain why he had chosen such harm. I could have told him that apology was a small coin. Instead, I watched him look at the peonies and then at Ruth's letter on my lap. Thank you, I said. Say it again when you mean it. He nodded once and walked away from the garden. He did not look back. That was as much as I could ask. He would return, sometimes, to volunteer at the programs he had been ordered to support. He would have to listen to people who had lost things because of him. That listening was part of the work that would change him if anything would. June squeezed my hand and led me back inside. The room smelled of coffee and warm bread. People chatted in low voices. Martha had started a list of future workshops and volunteers. Lydia set up a small bulletin board with names and numbers for anyone who needed help. The town had taken what had been cruel and turned it into a scaffold for care. That was the victory I wanted. Not the ruin of a single man, but the rebuilding of many lives. Ruth's letter remained my guide. I tucked it away that night beside the locket she had worn. The silk dress sat in a sealed box in the attic. I did not throw it away. It had a place. It had a story. I closed the lid and walked out to the porch. The air smelled like rain after a long dry spell. The stars were sharp and indifferent and grand. I thought of the years of small acts that led to that night. The sandwiches packed, the hands held, the nights spent waiting up for a sick child. I thought of the times I had bent and the times I had stood. The life I had lived had not been famous. It had been ordinary and steady. That steadiness had carried me through the loudness of a viral moment and the quiet work that followed. I slept that night with June's hand in mine. In the morning, we planted a small row of peonies where the old ones had been trimmed. The soil was damp and dark. We pressed the roots in gently, one by one. Martha fetched the watering can and watered the row with careful, slow strokes. The town would come together again to keep Ruth's table alive and to remind one another that dignity is not a headline. It is the patient work of ordinary people. When I looked at June then, I saw not the frightened woman who had run from her wedding, but someone who had learned who she was. She carried her mother within her like a compass. She carried me too, and I carried her. We had been small once, and we remained small in many ways. That smallness was our strength. The last time I opened Ruth's letter, she had written something that was not a command and not a prophecy. It was a quiet wish. I smiled and put the paper away. The town is still talking about the wedding and the fire and the man who caused both. Some call it a reckoning. Some call it a lesson. I choose to call it a turning. Cruelty once lit a match and thought it could burn a life into shape. The match did not shape anything. It revealed what needed mending. I am no hero. I am an old man who loved his daughter and kept a promise to a woman who wore a locket and hummed as she washed dishes. The world will always have loudness and cheap spectacle. It will also, if tended, have quiet dignity. The latter, when practiced steadily enough, will make rooms that cruelty cannot enter. If you were moved by Ephraim's story, his quiet courage, his devotion, and the power of grace over vengeance, remember this. Dignity isn't weakness, and kindness isn't surrender. The world may reward noise, but it's the calm, honest souls who change lives. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Leave a comment below if you've ever faced cruelty and found strength in compassion. And if you want more powerful stories like this, real lessons wrapped in fiction about love, loss, and redemption, subscribe and stay with us. The next story might remind you that even after heartbreak, hope always finds a way home.